Helen, so gorgeous to finally meet you.
And you too. Look at us, two twin Helens. I love it.
I know
So
it's
good.
so fantastic. And I'm so pleased you've agreed to come and take some time out of your busy schedule to come and chat about narcissism and narcissistic traits.
I mean, you'd have to try hard to stop me because I love talking about it. So thank you for having me on to do so. It's an amazing opportunity. Thank you.
No, no, no. I knew you were going to be the person I wanted to reach out about
Mm.
this. I've narcissism's talked about such a lot, isn't it,
Yeah.
on social media and elsewhere. And it's a term that's banded around all the time now.
Yeah.
I think with the increase of social media as well. Um, but the reason I invited you on is because you are such an expert. That's really what you focus on, isn't it, in your practice?
Yeah, 100%. So I very much, my whole master's was around working therapeutically with adult children of narcissistic parents. And then I've got a separate interest in neurodivergence, so ADHD and autism specifically, but they often overlap. So it's actually quite good because they are usually both relevant to each other. That's a whole different subject. But yeah, so my practice is largely adult children of narcissistic parents or people who've left romantic relationships, but often they then discover they have a narcissistic parent too, unfortunately.
Oh, that was one
Yeah.
of my questions. So we'll come to that. Because I see that a lot in behaviors of then understanding why they were attracted to a narcissistic person as an adult. We'll come to that. But I also wanted to, before we delve in, is mention your book because you wrote a book with Kate McKenna, didn't you?
Yeah, Casey.
Katie
Yeah.
McKenna, sorry.
Yeah, that's
Um,
okay.
and it's great. I mean, the title is so eye-catching, but I'll hold it up for the camera. And the book is called You're Not the Problem: The Impact of Narcissism and Emotional Abuse and How to Heal. And that was a Sunday Times bestseller, wasn't it?
It was. I know, what an
No,
amazing thing. I
congratulations.
can't, that's a bit weird, thinking wise. But yeah, amazing, really amazing.
Congratulations. No, and
Thank
well
you.
deserved. And I think it says a lot about people really wanting to understand narcissism. There's
Yeah,
a real
yeah.
want, a hunger for the information, isn't there? And actually, Helen, when I opened the book to read it, I wasn't conscious at first. And then I realized I'd been holding my breath. Yeah.
Goodness me.
And I was like, God, Helen, breathe,
Hmm.
relax, because it's desperately sad, isn't it, when you're reading about people's experiences?
Hmm.
These aren't just words on a page. They're real people. You bring in case studies,
Yeah.
you bring in real people and their experiences. And we all know people who have had these experiences, and it's desperately sad for them. The impact on their mental health is huge, isn't it?
I mean, the ripple effect of growing up with a narcissistic parent is almost unfathomable because essentially what somebody does, I see in my comment sections all the time, oh, my whole personality is a trauma response. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's all you had was trauma. And so you were in an environment that you had to survive. And so what you developed were coping mechanisms, and you've mistaken that for your personality. And that is devastating truth to be confronted by and to have to kind of unpick and understand because it means letting go of all of those coping mechanisms to discover who you actually are. And yeah, the impact of it is, I just can't ever emphasize enough how bad the impact is. It's so bad.
I know, I know. I wonder whether it would be a good starting point now, Helen, to actually define what narcissism is.
Yeah, I can. It's a it's a giant
It's a
question. It's a
massive
really
question, sorry,
yeah.
because there's also
Yeah.
different types of narcissism, isn't there, as well? And the list is so long, but there's subtypes. And so I'll just hand the question to you and work your magic.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Well, basically, when we're talking about narcissism, we could be looking at either healthy narcissistic traits or unhealthy narcissistic traits. And that's a really important distinction, especially if you're in recovery from this kind of abuse that's associated with narcissistic personality disorder, because to be able to move into healthy narcissism is really important. But that's a whole side quest. But when it comes to NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, we're looking at narcissistic traits that are very rigid, they're very immovable, there's no growth, self-reflection, there's no acknowledgement of the impact on others, and it's about using other people to maintain a sense of worth, a sense of self, through their admiration, through their special treatment of you. And so when I did the master's, it was looking at all these different explanations and descriptions in all these research papers. And I kind of boiled down what we would see in this behavior to 5 traits, 5 main traits. And that would be grandiosity, entitlement, exploitation, motivational empathy, and impaired self-awareness. And those 2 last ones are really important because people get them wrong all the time.
Do you want
So,
to
yeah,
repeat those? Do you want to repeat those last 2?
yeah, sure. Motivational empathy and impaired self-awareness. And the reason people get it wrong is because in the various, well, the DSM-5 and the ICD-11, it describes NPD as having a lack of empathy. But whenever you read it in places, it just says lack of empathy. But when you delve into the DSM or the ICD, it's more that it's an impaired empathy. And what it is an unwillingness to step into someone else's shoes. It's not that they can't, it's that they won't. And so there's a very big difference, and that they use empathy for gain. So I'm going to weaponize your empathy against you so that I can avoid accountability and manipulate you into doing what I want you to do. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a really important distinction. And the same with the impaired self-awareness, because again, most people think lack of self-awareness, but actually there is an awareness. It's just not deep enough to be able to self-reflect and change or accept accountability. The awareness is that I know that if I do this thing, it makes you do that thing, and therefore I get what I want. So there's an awareness of the behavior.
So actually what you're saying here, which is really important, is we need to consider there's an intent.
Yeah.
And that feels uncomfortable, doesn't it?
Really difficult, isn't it?
That's what hurts, isn't it? There's an intent.
Hugely so. Because I think if you think about clients that you work with, a lot of them sit in the hope that there's the ignorance, that they don't know what they're doing, they tried their best, and it sort of comes back to, have you communicated that thing that they do hurts you? Well, yeah, but they can't help it. Do they know that it hurts you? Yes. Okay. So then that means there must be an intent or such a lack of care about you that they don't, their need is so much more important than their care for you or your well-being, that they are willing for you to hurt as a result of meeting it.
And that realization in the moment, Helen, of someone realizing that someone has that intent, it must be such a light bulb moment of action they can then take or can't take. I wonder whether it would be helpful to say what, in terms of, so you've listed the 5, and that's great, and that's really helpful. How does it manifest? So how does it manifest in behaviors of that, the narcissistic traits? What are people going to be seeing?
It's essentially the narcissist becomes the sun, and everyone else revolves around them. And if they're not revolving around them, they get very, very cross about it. And then they go into a smear campaign. But essentially what we're seeing is all these traits, all the entitlement, the exploitation, the empathy, the self-awareness, are feeding the sense of superiority. So it's all about being better than everyone else and making everyone prove that over and over and over again. So what you'll see is either this being displayed very overtly, rather, so it's very obvious, like, I'm better than you, I've done all this, I've done that, I earn more money, I've got a bigger house, a flasher car, or it's very covert and it's hidden, and then it becomes that kind of, why would they want something like that? So I don't need those things. So I'm better than them because I wouldn't need a flashy car. So there's this superiority is the sort of big indicator. And then it's the lack of accountability. Again, you've done this thing that hurts me. Well, that's your fault. Well, I only did that because you made me. So it's, oh, well, I just guess I'm the worst person in the whole world then, aren't I? Well, that's a reductive argument. That doesn't help move anything forward. And all that does is demand reassurance that they're not the worst person in the world. And suddenly we've deflected away from what they've done wrong to reassuring them that they're a decent human being.
Yeah, you can see that play out, can't you? Particularly in the adult-child relationship, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously we
Oh,
see
yeah.
it in adult relationships as well, but you can see how the child, for um, that basic human need of survival, would suddenly do that to the adult narcissist in their life. You can really see that playing out in that relationship so clearly, can't you?
Oh,
And then
yeah.
taking that into adulthood because it's the only way they've known how to have relationships.
Yeah. I saw a thing, maybe it might even have been on your Instagram today. Was it today? I can't remember. Anyway, I saw a thing that just said, it's not that you attract narcissists or abusers, it's that you've been taught to tolerate abuse.
Yes, yes, yes. Very, very clear.
Yeah.
Do you want to repeat that? I loved that, Helen.
Okay. It's not that you attract narcissists, it's that you've been taught to tolerate abuse.
Yeah, so powerful. So
Really
powerful.
important. And then it relieves people of the responsibility,
Yeah.
that it's their fault. And yes, we have responsibility to change the behavior that allows us to stay in those toxic relationships. And that's really important as part of your healing process, to take responsibility of where you didn't speak up, where you people pleased, where you were so fearful of losing the relationship and all the kind of pain that might bring, that you squished yourself into a shape that you thought they might accept, but still obviously don't accept. You've got to take responsibility for that, but it's not your fault that you were doing that. That was a taught behavior. You learned that as a survival mechanism, you know?
And as you say that, Helen, it's so sad, isn't it? It's laced with such sadness that so many people don't learn that. They don't
Yeah,
realize, they've never, they're not reading the papers about it or watching the podcasts on it. And they do still hold that internal belief system that it's them. And just to hear someone say those words can just be so incredibly healing and validating, can't it, in the moment? That
yeah.
deeper level of understanding. This is a great conversation. It's fantastic, Helen. Um, would it be useful to say what narcissism isn't? Because it's banded around all the time on social media. It
Mm.
almost feels like every other person is a narcissist if they've let you down, or
Oh, yeah.
I'm being very careful here because I know there's an awful lot of narcissism out there, and I'm not belittling anyone who's said
Sure,
it,
sure. Yeah.
but just trying to bring some clarity to the way it's talked about on Instagram, particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point, because you see a lot of armchair diagnosing and you see somebody saying this person's a narcissist, and it's, well, we're all narcissists, so let's just put that in the mix for a start, because we all have.
Expand on that,
Yeah,
Helen. Do.
sure thing. I love this bit because it's like everyone goes, "Oh my God, what? I'm a narcissist." Yeah, you are, because you have narcissistic traits. We all do. We all have ambition, drive, motivation to meet our needs. We sometimes oppress them and we sometimes prioritize them. It's just a kind of what environment we're in and where it's appropriate. The idea being that we're not hurting other people in doing those things, right? So healthy narcissism is that we're not hurting others in order to meet our entitlement, feel our kind of sense of healthy superiority. But the unhealthy expression of these traits, where somebody could be deemed a narcissist, that's quite an extreme diagnosis. So yes, there's a lot more NPD than we think, I would say, and we could go into statistics, and I'm happy to explain a bit of it. But when we're looking at, oh, they've let me down, that they're so entitled, they've done this, that, and the other, that makes them a narcissist. We are actually devaluing what NPD is, the experience of those who really are being abused by people who have NPD, and being very reductive too. There are gosh, how many cluster B personality disorders? HPD, BPD, ASPD, and MPDs, four cluster B personality disorders, and they all hold this kind of overlapping traits. So there's even an argument at the moment not to have a diagnosis at all of NPD, and that's, whatever. But the idea that everyone is a narcissist is just obviously fundamentally flawed. Someone having a bad day, the point and the difference is that when someone makes a mistake or says no to you, that are you hearing a no and hearing that as a rejection and a personal thing when actually them meeting their needs is perfectly okay, and that maybe you've got a wound around rejection, valid, but also yours to manage? Or are they exploiting and hurting you and deliberately attacking you? There's a really big difference between someone having a bad day, making a mistake, taking accountability, and changing a behavior, growing from that thing, and someone deliberately, intentionally exploiting other people in order to wound and hurt and gain and get whatever it is that they're looking for. They're
Yeah.
very different. Yeah.
Helen, thank you for that. And just two things there I wanted you to just clarify for the listeners who may not be familiar with all the terms that
Yeah,
we're
sorry,
mentioning
I'm
here. No, no, no.
theory
It's
of
just that I
mind.
have a
Yeah.
big pool of people listening. Do you want to talk about what you mean by cluster B?
Sure. So first of all, before I say it, the DSM is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, and it's primarily used in the United States. It's highly problematic in many different ways. I won't go into those ways, but largely it's only used in the States. And when we talk about NPD, we refer to it largely because most of the research for NPD was done in the States. So it all ties in together. But there's another manual, which is the ICD-11, which I forget what international something for diseases. I forget what the C is for. But that is a widely medical book. It's not just mental health. It's all medical conditions. In the DSM-5, there are different personality disorders, and cluster B is a subsection of those personality disorders. So in cluster A, I think you've got things like schizoid affective personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder. So there's just a different expression of personality disorders in these clusters. So cluster B tend to be these quite extreme, dark, usually carry a lot of abuse, not always. And I want to caveat that with the, borderline personality disorder is so stigmatized. And what's really dreadful is that a lot of children of narcissistic parents develop borderline. And that behavior that's associated with that can be really tricky in relationships, but it's not intentional. And there is a very big difference.
Huge
And
difference.
yeah, and every person that I've worked with who shows borderline symptoms or has been diagnosed has wanted change and been keen to look at their behavior so that they can face it and be healed, right? So big difference.
Big difference. They're also in the therapy chair.
Exactly. And they're not there to manipulate the therapist into taking their side and validating whatever behavior they're doing. So yeah.
They're there, they're wanting to change. Something's not making sense. They want the help. They're looking for that relationship to be better, aren't they? That relationship with themselves, that understanding of themselves. And what I would say, that thank you for that clarification there. But what I would also say there is, when I say they're in there and they're in the therapy chair, is one of the questions that comes up all the time is, does a narcissist know they're a narcissist? And do narcissists go to therapy to change?
Okay. Again, quite a big question.
I know.
I'm going to try and break it down.
I've got all the big questions.
Well, I'll do as many as I can. So, does a narcissist know they're a narcissist? To a degree. Overts tend to. So there's a thing around overt and covert presentations of narcissism. Largely, what we do now is, well, I say we, this royal we, but what's the approach now really is to talk about it in a kind of multi-dimensional expression rather than overt or covert, rather than this kind of binary thing, that someone could have both overt and covert traits and be NPD. So, but when we're seeing somebody who is more heavily leaning towards overt, if you said to them, you're a narcissist, they would likely respond with, so what? It's got me to where I am. If you've got a problem with it, it's your problem, not mine. Right? So probably do know to a degree, maybe not care about it. In fact, that is exactly it. They don't care. And if you were to say to someone more covert presenting, you're a narcissist, how could you say that about me? Oh no, I try to do everything for everyone. But they never say why. Why do you think that? What that would be terrible. It all becomes about the person accusing them and how bad they are for accusing them and all that stuff. So there is an awareness. That's where the impaired self-awareness sits, is that there is an awareness. There's a reason they don't sit in the therapy chair. There's a reason they put themselves, don't put themselves in the way of people who might be able to diagnose them. Is a reason that they smear campaign people who challenge them or call them out for their behavior. They know to a degree what they are and what they're doing.
Yes, and that's the other thing that I wanted to pick up on from what you said a little while back was about the smear campaign tactics. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Smear campaigns are utterly awful to be subjected to. And I imagine most people have had some experience of it on varying degrees, whether to this kind of full-blown extent or not. If you accidentally challenge a sense of superiority in a person with NPD or even high narcissistic traits, or somebody who's threatened in that way, the response to that is to destroy you, to annihilate you, to tell everybody how awful you are. So they will often use something called triangulation, which is an emotional abuse tactic, to kind of whisper in ears like, oh, Helen's done this thing and she didn't want me to tell you, but she's really annoyed with you. Or, oh my God, Helen's done all this stuff to me and she's so awful and I can't believe this and da da da. And people can get really sucked in to that story and only hear that story. They don't go and fact check. They don't go and find it out. And so the victim suddenly finds themselves being cast as the villain in the story, and they are then kind of left picking up pieces and recognizing that relationships that they thought were valuable and solid have been utterly destroyed because this person has come and said all this stuff. And the worst bit is when there's just like one tiny grain of truth in it. And so look at this evidence, look at this evidence. Whereas actually, if you were to see the entire picture, that's not what's happening at all. It's been cherry picked. So the victim wakes up and suddenly finds they're this villain, relationships have gone, and it's a really, really difficult experience because especially if you have rejection wounds and injustice wounds, and of course it's hugely unjust and hugely destructive. I always call it the bullshit filter because it shows you which relationships really are solid.
Oh, I love that.
Because,
I love
yeah,
that. Yeah. That really resonated for me. You really learn who those people are that have got
yeah.
your back. Yeah.
Yeah, or just that are using critical thinking, because it's all right if they go away and be like, do you know what, your story isn't making as much sense, and I need space from either you or them or what, or both of you, and blah. And it's about somebody who's just willing to step back and not be influenced by this narrative, because if someone can believe these things about me that this person is saying without coming and talking to me about it or hearing my version of it, well, I don't want them in my life. They are not a safe person.
That safe person part was really, really critical, isn't it? That safe person. Gosh.
Yeah.
And Helen, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the victim becoming the villain. We're talking about someone's life here, aren't we? We're talking about,
Mm.
it's not just difficult, it's actually really dangerous.
Yeah.
And you and I both know that from the work we do. It's incredibly challenging for that individual. Some of them aren't strong enough,
No.
and it's heartbreaking.
Just awful. I mean,
Yeah.
so destructive. And, suicide, all
Oh,
of those things.
it's
Yeah.
exactly at the power of a narcissist.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
terrifying. I wonder whether it would be a good idea now to really talk about, 'cause I think it's fascinating when we do this, is look at what actually causes narcissism, because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not always straightforward, is it? And I think most people think it's just one thing,
Mm.
but it's not, is it? So I'd love to hear your expertise on this.
Well, there's lots of different schools of thought, of course. There's also whether or not there's a genetic element to it, which there could well be. We don't know yet. There's nothing been isolated. There's been some research, but it hasn't quite borne any fruit. However, if you go off the kind of, I sit with Kohut, who Heinz Kohut was an Austrian psychoanalyst, and he is a self-theorist, and he kind of was operating the same time as Otto Kernberg, who was in the Freudian school, the Kleinian, you know, that sort of place. And the way that Kohut describes it is as a kind of empathetic deficit in childhood, in that a child will develop MPD if they are exposed to emotional, physical, sexual abuse or neglect abuse, and also if they have a smothering parent. So those very helicopter parents who are very intrusive, very enmeshed will also potentially, so golden children are often very enmeshed with their sorry, I've just brought more terminology in.
That's okay.
Yeah, golden children who tend to be the narcissistic parents' favorite child will tend to be quite enmeshed is not quite, but just they can get away with everything. They're like Teflon, nothing sticks. They're always there's no boundaries, no rules, no accountability. So they often become MPD too. So there's that school of thought. Then Kernberg just thinks of it as a malignancy, that it's always pathological, that it can't really be. He doesn't. I mean, he does look at healthy narcissism, but he's really heavily into the idea that it's pathologized. It's not that it's hard for it to be a healthy thing, but it's essentially abuse and trauma is what creates this behavior. And that people find very difficult. And my answer to that is we can have compassion for the trauma. We do not have to tolerate the behavior, right? And that is vital. We can feel sad for that child, but just like the people that sit in the chairs opposite us, it's not their fault, but it is their responsibility, you know, and to fix it, change it, not to do harm to others. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think and you make that point so clearly and so loud in your book as well. We can have compassion for, but still not tolerate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's so game changing when you hold those words really close, that you can, it's their agency, their self-agency, their responsibility to not be like that, you know, to heal from that. But for the victim, for the person being affected by, because interestingly, I think another thing that social media kind of warps a little bit is the concept of it being very male.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually we need to be, I'd love to talk to you about the rates, the female narcissist, you know,
Wow.
whether there's stats around it. I know they're a bit broad, it's a bit difficult, but you know, how does it show up between male and females?
It's a really difficult statistic because the idea being that if I was to stand in the street with a survey that was screening people for MPD traits, they're not going to do it because they know. So you're not going to catch it. And the only reason people tend to get diagnosed is because of some kind of crisis that has forced them into that situation, like someone's given them an ultimatum and it's caught in a kind of psychometric testing or something like that, or it's court ordered. So the statistics are really unreliable. I don't actually know whether there is a gender statistic. I don't have that information, but what I do know, more men are diagnosed than women, but so men will tend to be overt expressing and women will be covert expressing. That's shifting now generationally because of social conditioning changing and expectations and everything else, because men are allowed to be loud and flashy and confident and bossy and bolshy and take control and be domineering and we all swoon over a handsome man that is in charge, and a woman that does that is a bitch. She's bossy. She's all the negative words that describe women who are in leadership, say. So women tend to be more covert presenting because women are meant to be demure and quiet and oh, it's okay, I won't be any bother. And actually they're making everyone run circles around them. So yeah, so we tend to see that men are more overt and women are more covert. But I do think that's shifting. If we were to take like the younger generations where MPD might be showing up now, I reckon you'd find it's shifted a bit because women are more allowed to be louder and bossier, and no, bossier is a horrible word, isn't it? But more
It's-
in control. Sorry, I hate the word bossy.
no, I know.
Can't
I know.
believe I used it.
Um,
No,
we can take that out if you want.
it's all right, it's fine.
No, I think it's changing.
Social joke, like conditioning.
Yes, it's changing.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing that more and more. I think it'd be quite interesting to talk about how, because obviously you work with narcissistic traits across or looking into the people who have been, affected by it. Um,
Mm.
looking at how someone growing up with a narcissistic caregiver,
Hmm.
you touched on it at the beginning. How would that manifest in that child as they become an adult? What kind of effects does it have on their mental well-being?
So what we would tend to see is they either go what we called in the book hyper dependent or hyper independent. And hyper dependent, we kind of amalgamated the ideas of codependency and people pleasing because they feel very similar. And so somebody who is hyper dependent would be scared of saying no, they'd be scared to express an opinion, they'd be doing everything for everyone, but secretly wanting people to be doing the same back, but never asking for it. On the times that they would ask for it and are denied, get really hurt by that, terrified of conflict, terrified of rejection, all of those things. So they're quite vulnerable, but also very hidden. So very hidden in themselves. So they become, people refer to themselves as social chameleons all the time, and like it's like a badge of honor. And that is a bad thing. That is not good. That means you're not holding your identity when you're with people. You're merging into who you think they want you to be so that they will accept you. And that's people pleasing.
Mm.
So that's not a healthy thing. And they do the same with people pleasing too. I'm such a people pleaser. That's not good. That's not good at all. But that's again a massive subject I could really rant on and get on my soapbox about. But let's just go down then over then to the hyper dependent. And usually we would see these enmeshed children becoming very hyper independent. And that is, again, they won't ask for help. But they keep people at arm's length. They don't depend on anyone. They would have been dreamers as children. They would have been the ones that kind of disappeared and were reading in a corner or hiding in a cupboard, doing whatever, and just don't really, they struggle to form intimate relationships, quite suspicious of people, don't really trust people in their kind of motivation, what they want from them, and feel very smothered. And the really interesting thing is that you often get in relationship a hyper independent and a hyper dependent doing this push-pull kind of movement relationship because each of them are used to the other as a model of a relationship.
Helen, that's fascinating, isn't it? It's
Mm,
fascinating. You at the beginning you started to talk about this, and I wanted to come to it. Do you talk about the child of a narcissistic parent
mhm.
seeking out unconsciously seeking out narcissistic relationships as an adult? We're seeing it, aren't we?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so I'd love, and as you said earlier, it's then that becomes the the light bulb moment of that understanding. Oh, hang on a sec.
Mm,
This is saying more about my background, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but it's making me think because you talk about it in the book around attachment theory. We can't ignore that, can we?
no.
And that real element of disorganized attachment in the
Yeah.
severe narcissistic upbringing. But talk to me a bit about the seeking out familiar relationship part, because I think it's fascinating for people to become aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is all relational patterns. So we repeat what we know. And so if your relational pattern is, or your learned experience is, love looks like this, I withhold it, I use it, I weaponize it, I punish you with it. Love is hurtful and painful and comes with it moments of great intimacy. And this obviously is really confusing for people, that there are moments where it's brilliant and it's wonderful and everything's fine, but it turns on a dime and the next thing you've been excluded, rejected, humiliated, punished, shamed, and you've got no idea why. You've looked at them in the wrong way, or you've done something, you're not complying or living up to some kind of expectation. If that is your love model, you are just going to repeat that until you break it, which is hard. You know what that's, it's the, you sit with clients and the other side of this again is that, and I'm going to just own I've done this, where you think because it looks different, it is different, but it's not, it's the same. Because it's still love being weaponized or utilized against you. And okay, so they're not shouty and aggressive, but now they're really like stonewally and they leave you alone and they don't engage and they won't have conflict with you and they won't discuss difficult things. But that's because they don't like conflict and they don't want to argue, rather than them punishing you and controlling you through withholding that kind of resolution from you, or you being able to have a voice or hold them accountable. So we just keep repeating what we know until we become really aware of what we know. So we do fall into these relationships with people who were similar to what we learned was love in childhood. It's really sad.
It is really sad. And I know that when I spoke to you before we did this recording, I said to you, I'd love you to give the listeners some, I don't like saying tips, but just some tools or just something that they can take away from this before we move on to the questions.
Sure.
For my Instagram community, just around tools for people to either develop awareness or how to navigate a relationship with a narcissist. Just some thoughts from yourself on that.
Sure. So the first thing is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. But to have boundaries, you have to have identity. And to have identity, you have to know who you are, what your values are, your belief systems, what's important to you in terms of what you want from yourself, the world, and other people. Because when you grow up in narcissistic family systems, you learn to ignore all those things. And as I said right at the beginning, you develop all the coping mechanisms. So it's peeling those away. So there's 3 things that we have to do to protect ourselves from getting into relationship with narcissists. And then there's another thing if we're in them to try and manage that. And those 3 things are build the identity. As a result, what will happen when you build identity is your boundaries will naturally fall into place, because you'll suddenly start going, I don't like that thing. And you'll start noticing it. And then you'll go, I don't know if I want to be in a relationship with someone who does that sort of thing. I might remove myself from this thing. So there's the building identity is key. Then, as a result, your boundaries go into place. But alongside all of that, you have to start making peace with rejection. Okay? And again, as you build your identity and start building self-esteem, worth, value, that sense of fear of rejection is going to dramatically drop, hugely.
Brilliant, Helen.
Right?
Brilliant.
So everything comes back to identity, because if you have an identity, you have boundaries, you aren't scared of rejection, you can leave toxic relationships, and you can trust yourself that you will leave when you notice you are in one. So it's utterly, like, the most important thing is identity building, 100%.
And that's a big piece of work. That's a
huge.
It's a huge piece of work. It's very easy for us to sit here and say, oh, these 3 things.
Yeah, that's all you have to do.
These 3 tips. And really important for people to understand that's a big piece of work, but it's so worth it. And what we're actually fundamentally talking about here is building your sense of self, is moving from insecure attachment to self to secure attachment to self.
Exactly.
And what a gift that is, and the ripple effect of that, because every child of a narcissist, then who ends up in a relationship with a narcissist, it's just going on, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then you having children with that narcissist, and then your children being parented by a narcissist. Someone breaking that cycle. Let it be you. Let it be you. I loved
So
that, Helen.
important.
Helen, I loved that. And I think that's something people can really take away from today.
If you're in a relationship with a narcissist, it depends what you're trying to manage in there. So again, boundaries, holding your kind of space, recognizing where fear, obligation, and guilt are being weaponized against you to motivate you to do something against your will. Look at where that's coming up. Because if ever we're in a relationship and we're feeling those things, we need to really think about what's happening in that relationship. Those are really big indicators that the relationship is not healthy. Now, they might be originated in us, and we might need to learn why we feel those things. But let's look for the evidence, see if it's there. Are they doing anything that's making me scared to say no to them, to hold them accountable, etc., etc.? And then the other thing is looking at grey rock method and yellow rock method, which I'm going to just invite people to Google because it'll be easier. But it's essentially very boundaried communication, not justifying ourselves, not giving over information. When we grow up in these environments, we feel like we have to explain everything as to why we're saying no. No is a full sentence. You do not have to explain. You do not have to justify. You can say, and I mean, you don't even need to apologize, but you could say, sorry, not able to, if you want to soften it, but sorry, I can't because I've got this thing on, that thing on, and I'm doing this, and I'm just really busy. Well, all you're doing there is giving them knives to throw at you to sabotage your argument, to cancel out your no. So we're looking at very restricted communication and boundaries. And ultimately, to avoid a smear campaign, we want the narcissist to discard us, not the other way around. So we let them get bored of us. So we become a grey rock. And then they're like, you're useless. You're not giving me supply anymore. I'm off.
My book, Choose You, is out now and offers you ways to prioritise you, meet your needs, say yes to you, develop a more secure sense of self where you feel you matter, learn to set boundaries, wrap yourself in self-love, find your authentic self, and ultimately choose you in the same way you would want those you love to choose themselves too. Choose You, out now. Helen, this part of the conversation has just been brilliant, and I know the listeners will get so much from it. The other part that I really wanted to go to was where I invite questions in from my Instagram community.
Sure.
I got the most questions I've ever got when I've put something out about having a guest on.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm not surprised, and I'm sure you're not surprised. I think people are fascinated by narcissism, and I think people do want to learn more. And I know that just from the few things we've talked about already, the clarity that people will have is huge today. So I've picked out a few questions. Some of them we've already answered. So I'll try not to go over things. Can a narcissist change?
Not if they're in the NPD state. Or, they're so hard. I feel a bit unfair saying it that way.
Okay.
There are models that are effective, but someone with NPD has to want to engage. They have to want to change. Anybody who sits in our chair has to want to change, right? Like anyone that's sat in therapy has to be willing to face the truth about themselves. And that can be really bloody difficult. That can be really painful. And if you've got NPD, if you think of NPD as the meta of defense coping mechanisms, accepting that they are fallible, just even that concept is virtually impossible on the basis that they have NPD, because it's to protect them from feeling that they're fallible. So they grow this idea of perfectionism, superiority, better than, in order to counter the kind of impact of the abuse that they've experienced in childhood, early childhood. So in theory, they can change. Again, it would depend. We're talking about traits on a spectrum, so it would depend how badly they are impacted by the traits. So if we were to look at someone like Ted Bundy, who is absolutely in that category, he's not going to change. He's not going to change. But if we look at somebody who's less severe and maybe only just across the threshold, with the right intervention, they might be able to. But again, it's about the desire. And if someone's not willing, they're not going to.
I think the important thing you brought in there also for people to hold an awareness of is the spectrum.
Yes, yes.
You know, there is
Yeah.
a spectrum with this as well. There is a spectrum. So thank you for bringing that up. How to best navigate, do you think we've covered this? How to best navigate a relationship with a narcissistic parent as an adult? We've touched on it obviously with the tools, but I wonder, just being a bit more specific to the person that's asked that question.
It's a really difficult one because it's a very personal one.
I know.
And, you know, I cannot tell you how many times people have started therapy and said to me, I don't want to go no contact. No problem. We'll just find a way through it. We'll put boundaries in. We'll learn what's happening. And not inevitably, but by the end, they have gone no contact. No, not always, but it's just more often than not, simply because as your sense of self grows and as your identity grows and as you're more and more aware of how you're being treated and how it isn't your fault and how it isn't okay, you tolerate it less and it becomes intolerable eventually. And that's a very difficult place to reconcile. So navigating relationships with narcissistic parents again depends on where they are on that spectrum. How bad is it? How willing are they to reflect? How you know easy is it for them to take accountability? And I say easy and that's why I paused with the word easy, because it's a misleading word. It's very difficult. But is there any effort at all to reflect and grow and change? Or is it total deniability, total deflection, total Darvo, as in turning it around and making the victim the villain? So ultimately, it becomes a very personal choice. But I think one of the things that children of narcissistic parents fall into is, and are taught, that they are responsible for how their parent feels. They're given this omnipotent power of how their parent behaves towards them. And if they're treated badly by the parent, it's their fault that that's happened. And so they grow up with this omnipotent power over how everyone feels. So either they do people pleasing and make sure everyone's okay. Everyone has to be safe before I can feel safe. Everyone has to be happy before I can be happy. Or they withdraw completely because the pressure and overwhelm of that is just far too much. I'm much better off not having close relationships, right? So that's why they go one of those two ways. As a child of a narcissistic parent, the thing that you probably need to hold front and center is that they are an adult. They are responsible for their emotions. Their reaction to the consequences of their behavior is theirs to manage, not yours. And so if you're feeling pulled into managing their behavior, if you're feeling like you're having to spend a week crafting a text where you're saying no to them because you're fearful of their reaction, what are you gaining from that relationship? What is it actually bringing to your life? Are you only there because of social obligation, your fear, obligation, and guilt towards them, the way they've made you responsible for their feelings? You need to look at that. And then if you still want to be in relationship, and I really do advocate for personal choice on this. I get a lot of accusations. You just want everyone to go no contact. It's just not true. I want everyone to make their own path and walk it, right? If you choose to stay in relationship with that person, the caregiver, the parent, do so with the empowered knowledge. Do it with informed boundaries. Do it with informed decisions. And build the resilience to their behavior of the reaction to your no, holding them accountable, whatever it is that you put in your boundaries. But remember, you cannot change them. Nothing you can do will change them. And it's sitting in toxic hope when you sit in that space. And that is just going to wound you so badly. Yeah.
I love the way you said about empowerment in there. And I also love the way, because, you know, the same in my practice around it, I don't want to go no contact. And then, but as that person gains their sense of self, things shift, don't they?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's never as black and white as they first thought.
Yeah.
And things shift and they grow and they change. And day by day, bit by bit, things just shift and change. And the relationship changes, your confidence changes.
Yeah.
And it's really important to say this, it's not an overnight thing either. You
Oh,
know, it's not
absolutely not.
you've had years of this, you
Yes.
know, this is great answer, great answer.
Actually, I just want to add to that
Yeah.
the years of it. When you are healing, even when you have done all the work and I mean, nobody's ever fully healed. And I mean, that can worry people, but it's a good thing because we're always working and evolving and growing. And if you ever get to a place where you're like, well, I'm fully healed, there's a problem and we need to like go back and see where that's coming from. But because even people who grow up with healthy parents need to work on themselves and have things, that's a good thing. We're always evolving and growing. But one of the things that people often come into therapy going, I never want this to happen to me again. And they're very black and white about I should be able to stop all these things happening. And again, this also can feel a bit hopeless, but it's actually really important that you know it and absorb it and accept it. You will make mistakes. You will fall into a toxic relationship with someone, whether it's romantic or a friendship or a colleague. You will not see red flags. That is okay. The point is, the minute you see them, you know to remove yourself, that you don't prolong it. You don't try and be good enough for them so that they treat you kindly. You don't stay there out of fear, obligation, and guilt. You go, whoa, this is very familiar. I don't like this. I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And you remove yourself. You will make mistakes.
That takes such awareness, doesn't it, as well, though, to see that red flag
Huge.
because it's familiar. So it's not automatically a red flag to that person. You're
Yeah.
answering so many questions just with that answer, and that was
Oh,
brilliant
good.
around
Thank you.
awareness. Um, what's the best way to create a boundary with a narcissist? We've touched on it in the first part of the discussion. I just wonder you wanted
Mm.
to just
It's a really tricky one because what we're always trying to avoid is triggering the smear campaign. Because again, while we're not responsible for their behavior or their feelings, we just don't want to be on the receiving end of that. Because it is awful being on the receiving end of a smear campaign, as we said in the first half. So it's boundaries is going to be you're going to have to learn a skill where it's so gentle they don't even notice. So you're doing it so quietly that it's just oh yeah, no, I've just been busy. When they go, you haven't messaged me for a week. Oh, I've just been busy. How are you? Right. So we're immediately turning it back onto them. So immediately in conversation, turning things back to them. So they're talking about them. But when we're putting in a boundary, we're just it depends how you want to go about it. Again, it's going to be personal. It's going to be who
course it
you're doing
is.
it with
Of
and
course
what
it is.
their reactions are like. But ultimately, um, it's going to be putting it in so that you're not justifying, explaining all of those things. You're not infantilizing them by going, oh God, they're so hurt. And, because I've said, no, I won't go and do whatever. Or let them be in. I mean, the thing with parents wanting to be in the room when women are giving birth or people are giving birth, like, and then the narcissistic parents reacting really badly if they hear the word no around that. It's about letting them go off and have their reaction.
Brilliant.
So not trying to manage the reaction, but also not trying to subject yourself to the smear campaign. So it's a juggling act and a balancing act, and it's really hard. But grey rock and yellow rock
Yeah, I love
methods
that.
are
I
the
love that.
greatest ones to be able to use.
What I'll do in the show notes is link those concepts for people because so people can,
Perfect.
yeah, because it will be interesting. I think people will really be able to hold on to
Yeah.
those elements. So thank you for that. I thought this was interesting
Okay.
based on also what we've talked about today. I think I may have narcissistic traits, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
How do I untangle this confusion? Someone's obviously, I don't know them. Can't see behind them. I've got no context, but they're clearly beginning to have some self-awareness around something that they're uncomfortable.
Mm. So this is amazing because it also allows me to bring in the idea, the myth that narcissists don't know they're narcissists. We talked about that at the beginning.
Yes.
They do know, but they just don't think it's a bad thing, right? So, first of all, when you're thinking about your own narcissistic traits, looking at how they are hurting people, if they are hurting people, what part of that is their stuff reacting to whatever, and what part of it is you silencing, controlling, doing anything like that. Because again, when we grow up in these environments, we also get learned behaviors. So one of the things that people most often learn is entitlement and my way or the highway. The way I do things is the right way to do things. And so if somebody does it differently, that's a threat to safety, even. So it becomes a trigger, actually. And yeah, so when you're looking at your own narcissistic traits, it's understanding what they're defending, first of all. So is it there to protect you from something? Is it there to protect you from rejection? Is it there to protect you from the idea that you're not perfect? All of these are going to be protecting you from shame if they're going into the unhealthy spaces. They're always going to be about shame. So what shame is it? What's it saying about you? What are you scared of in that shame? Healthy and toxic shame are two different things. One helps us align to who we want to be, and the other one is about telling us we're the worst person ever, and it's soul destroying and lasts days and weeks, even months, and sometimes. Whereas healthy shame is very brief, hours maximum. But when we're using narcissistic traits, we're trying to understand what motivates it, what's it protecting. These are childlike parts of ourselves. These narcissistic traits are based in toddler behavior. These are a 3-year-old going, that's not fair. I want this thing. I want my toy. Don't take that away. Yeah. I want the red cup, and it's right. Why do you need the red cup? What does that do for you?
Yeah.
How does that help you feel good about yourself? What value does it bring to you? So we're looking at those sorts of things. So look at what's under it. Like, why do I need it? And it's the same with anything, with all coping mechanisms,
Yeah.
because again, narcissism is a coping mechanism. It's just a really bloody awful one.
Of course it is. And looking at what is the function of
Yeah.
this coping mechanism, what is it, going that little bit deeper. Helen, I wonder whether just to round off now, it would be for anyone listening who is suspecting they're in a narcissistic relationship or suspecting that their caregiver was a narcissist.
Mm.
Where would you signpost them to start delving into this a little bit more? What resources do you find incredibly helpful, and what advice would you give?
So the first thing I'd be say would be very careful who you talk to about it, especially if people are in that system. So be mindful of who you're sharing that information. When you're coming into this awareness, it's very fragile, and you could be very easily gaslit into believing that you're still the problem, that you are actually, that it's not them. So be very careful who you talk to. Facebook groups. We've got a Facebook group. It's well, I've got the hub, and then there's the Old Insight group. There's my book, obviously. I'm going to plug that.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
very kindly did already. But finding different Facebook groups with people with similar experiences, with the knowledge that those can have toxic people in too, because they've got wounds as well. So just be conscious that what spaces you're existing in, and give yourself permission to leave. This is my number one thing for everybody in any kind of relationship. Give yourself permission to leave. So yeah, online forums, looking at books and podcasts, being selective where you get that information from, making sure that people are talking with the knowledge that they say they've got, because there's a huge amount of misinformation. And as you said, a lot of people are buzzing that word at the moment, and it's a bit tricky because there's a lot of mistruths. And certainly in our Facebook group, when we're post-approving, seeing a lot of stuff coming through that is giving misinformation out. And it's really, really dangerous, because again, that could gaslight and,
Of course it could.
hold recovery back. So blogs, books, there's a lovely book called, it's by Dana Morningstar, Out of the Fog, I think it's called. Do you know that one?
No, but you want to share it with me and I'll add it to the show notes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and your
Yeah.
Facebook group as well. I'll
Oh,
link
cool.
everything for everyone. And
Thank
actually,
you.
Helen, I was going to say, haven't you got lots of resources at the end of your book? Haven't you? Like all the articles you reference,
Loads. Yeah.
so much further reading. I like the way you said about being very careful, because these people are in a very fragile situation, aren't they? So
Yeah.
they need to be held.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important guidance there. Helen, I've just loved this conversation. I could
Me
honestly have
too.
spoken to you for hours, and I'm already thinking I'm going to invite you back.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank
If
you.
you
That
would
would be
like to come on again.
fabulous. Yeah, yeah.
Particularly, I was really fascinated in the things you were talking about at the beginning around neurodivergency.
Oh, yeah,
And that's a whole big topic on its own around that. So
yeah.
I'd love to bring you back if you would like to come back at another time to talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been
Oh, my
invaluable. Thank
total
you.
pleasure. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it so much and I'd love to come back. And I've, everything like parenting after trauma is another thing that I love talking about. So important. And yeah, there's so much work that we can do and learn, how to be healthy in the world and have healthy relationships.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And for anyone listening, go and follow Helen. She's got a
Oh, thank you.
fantastic account, great information. And yes, as I said, held up before, read the book.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant and such a good resource. Helen, thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Two Helens.
Two Helens.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much if you could follow the show, leave a quick rating, and maybe even a review to let others know what you think and whether they may enjoy the conversation too. Your support genuinely means so much. Thank you. Enjoy your day.